My story starts in the summer of 1987 or so. I'm 15 or 16 years old, and the doorbell of the tiny little townhouse where we live rings. My mom answers the door, and on the porch is this small woman, and she's got her arms out in front of her like the forks on a forklift. And on her arms is a gigantic cardboard box. And I can barely see her eyes over the top of the cardboard box, but I see that they're blue, and I see that they're tired, and I see that they're sad. And my mom starts thanking the woman profusely for the box, and she takes the box and she puts it down beside her. And when she does, the woman doesn't know what to do with her hands. She starts staring at her feet. And it's obvious she wants to get away as quickly as possible. My mom brings the box inside, and inside the box are clothes. Shirts and pants and sweaters, things that might fit my brother and I. And later on, I hear my parents talking about the contents of the box, and they say that the woman who dropped it off had a son who doesn't need it anymore, and that the blue-eyed woman with the tired and sad blue eyes is tired and sad because that boy doesn't need the clothes anymore because he's died. I live in a small town in northern British Columbia where there is no Sally Ann and there is no Goodwill, but it's small enough that everybody knows which family is in need, and our family is in need. My father's mental health issues are not being addressed, and so he's unemployed. And my mother is a part-time substitute teacher, which means that there's not much money during the school year, and there is no money in July. And so when I go back to school in September, I will wear the plaid shirts that belong to a dead boy I've never met. My mother is proud, though. She refuses to indulge in self-pity. She refuses to let us indulge in self-pity. If we decide that we're going to whine and complain, she will look us dead in the eye and she will say, "Keith, if you want sympathy, you can find it in the dictionary. Between shit and syphilis." She was like that. She's also proud that my brother and I never miss a meal, and every dinner time there is food on the table, and it may not be fancy, but we are full. And then sometimes there are little luxuries. Like in the holidays, my mom sort of squirrels away a few pennies and she buys a pound of butter. And that pound of butter is not what we normally get. Butter is too expensive normally. So my morning toast usually has imperial margarine in the gigantic 2-liter tubs. They're blue and white. But at Christmas, that butter makes shortbread. And if there is a physical embodiment of safety and peace and lack of chaos, it is the feeling of that shortbread cookie melting on my tongue on Christmas morning. Scoops of butter and sugar held together with just the slightest hint of flour. But the lack of chaos from cookies only happens at Christmas, and so I have to get out of the house in other ways. I become one of those kids who's like a full-time extracurricular kid. I go to stage band and concert band and theater, and I'm really, really into the church. It's choir practice on Tuesdays and youth group on Thursdays and regional youth leadership every 3 months and provincial youth leadership every 6 months or so. And then there's the occasional spaghetti supper on the weekends where we're raising money for charity. I'm there all the time. So much so that when I'm 15 years old, I think I want to become a minister. And that's in part because I really look up to my minister. His name is, if you can believe it, this is his actual name, Bob Schwab. And Bob kind of looks like a car salesman, or maybe the lawyer in Billions. He's like big and round, and he's got a bald head and a beard, and he's got a laugh that kind of sounds like failing car brakes. It's like really, really loud and squeaky. And Bob, I guess, hears through the grapevine that I'm curious about what he does for a living. And I expect that he's going to be impressed by it, that he is going to see this as a reflection of my respect for him, which it is. But he takes me aside one day. We're on a church meeting in a tiny little village on the west coast of BC called Bella Bella. And we go for a walk along the docks between the fishing boats. And his face turns really serious. And he says, "Keith, I hear you're thinking of the ministry." And I said, "Yeah, Bob, I am." And he said, "Keith, I want you to promise me something. Only do this if you think there's nothing else that will make you happy." And then he said something that I took to heart. He said, "Only do anything if you love it enough to give yourself to it totally." Which is pretty heavy advice to give to a 15-year-old kid, right? I heard a wow, like, holy cow, that's a pretty heavy load to take. But it was also some of the best advice I'd ever received in my entire life. And because of it, I didn't become a minister. I realized, in part, what I was finding in that part of my life was safety and community and family. But that doesn't mean I'm not still looking for church. I find it here. And recently, I found it, well, I think I may have seen the face of God in my favorite place on earth, Costco. I am a middle-aged man, after all. And as I said to my teenage daughter recently, I said, I hope you and your brother at one point find partners who love you as much as middle-aged men love Costco wholesale. So I was standing in Costco beside the 3-story high metal racks full of car batteries and dishwasher tabs, and I had a bag of tortilla chips in my arms the size of an infant. And something came on my earbuds. I mean, we all listen to music in church, right? And it was an odd song, a turn-of-the-century song by a British band called the Wombats. And it called Let's Dance to Joy Division. And it goes, "Let's dance to Joy Division and celebrate the irony. Everything is going wrong, but we're so happy." And I lifted off the ground. I was so full of a weird sort of gratitude, a feeling that I could only identify by looking at the tube of ground beef the size of a sleeping bag in my cart. And it was a beautiful feeling. Honestly, it was a beautiful feeling. It was a feeling that I would never have to worry about where my food was coming from or where my clothes were coming from. That I'd chosen to love my wife and my kids with every ounce of my being, to the point that they would never begin to understand the want that I knew they would never need. And I took that cart as the Wombats sang their song, and I saw the traffic jam. by the cashiers. And so I turned around and I went to the dairy case. And I grabbed not one, not two, but 3 pounds of lactantia salted butter. And that afternoon, my daughter and I made cookies. Thank you very much.